What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? We're going to go back and talk about McCarthyism and not how he couldn't be elected to the Speaker of the House.
Right, or do anything, that's substantive
Yeah.
in any way whatsoever, and resorted to crazy, media circusry in order to get reelected in the first place.
Well, the media circusry part is a part of the McKenzieism or McCarthyism we're going to talk about. Definitely, but the McCarthy we're talking about had a lot more lasting impact in not a good way.
Got it. There's too many McCarthys that are freaking weird. So
yeah, it's not if your last name is McCarthy, you might just want to consider,
staying
changing
out of a political office, maybe at
please
least.
Please don't run for anything. We don't need any more McCarthys in Washington.
Right. Although the Vikings might draft a quarterback with the last name McCarthy. So I don't know. It could be bad.
It could be. It could be.
We'll see.
We'll
find out next
we haven't
week,
we haven't had a great track record with McCarthy, just as across the board.
No, not the greatest.
We're very sorry if your name's McCarthy and you're a nice person.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure they exist. We just haven't seen them, in Washington.
No.
All right. Well, we're not talking about modern art, but
yeah. So I found this Jordan, do you enjoy some modern art?
Sometimes.
Do you have friends that are not just white people?
Not at all.
only white people.
Only white people.
Okay, well then you're probably safe. But another question was, would you sign a petition against nuclear weapons or just being anti-war, or are you a part of a union? And during the Red Scare, if any of those answers were yes, you could potentially be labeled as a communist and then, blacklisted from industries or just fired from your job.
At one point,
or
even literally
jailed.
thrown in jail. Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack with the Red Scare and McCarthyism. It's kind of our next step from where did socialism really start in America, and this is the reaction to that, and for sure to the Bolshevik Revolution.
This is a huge topic, and we're gonna try to cram it into an hour, not run over like we usually do. But
I believe in us.
Yeah, lots of faith here. So what is McCarthyism? If you're older than us, probably you're familiar with it, and even if you are our age, you're familiar with it. It was used to deter. McCarthy was a senator, who really hated communism. Really hated communism.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that he hated communism more than anybody else, but he just found traction in his political career that had not ever been there to, in a way, by using communism and communist beliefs in a way that was just really unfortunate.
Yeah, it was, and he was very successful in demonizing communism and perpetuating communist propaganda to the point where his name became the literal term for attitude towards communist and socialist ideas.
But also witch huntiness.
Oh, very, very witch hunty.
It definitely is not just anti-communist. It's the failure to find communists almost to an extent.
Oh my! It was the Salem witch projects of the 20th.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe it.
20th century, for sure. So, it's McCarthyism is the term how you describe people who are persecuted for their political beliefs, specifically around communism or perceived communism or socialism. You didn't even need to be communist or socialist.
No.
They just had to not like you and say you were a communist or a socialist, or be like, that seems a little communist or socialist. You think that everybody's equal. I don't know about you. I think we need some FBI investigation here, Hoover.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Joe McCarthy specifically started out with just riding the Red Scare, and then kind of getting super paranoid in that sense, and then using his newfound power to just like make anybody disagree with them appear to be communist or accuse them of being so, and then kind of stripping them of some political power in order to get what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So, classic, the word demagoguery was thrown around so much when researching this as like, I mean, potentially the first, like, especially the first television figure that was like achieved that sort of demagogue status.
Oh my God, yeah.
In American political history. So,
and he didn't invent like the accusatory persecution
No.
of communism, but he definitely took it to new levels.
yeah, he basically utilized modern communication and modern media like styles that we would recognize today in a way that had never been done before. So he kind of created, in a way, the circus of political coverage in the media that I don't know if it's the after effects that we're still seeing today, or if it would have happened eventually, no matter what. But like, he definitely boosted it. He kickstarted it for sure.
There was definitely, I think that there was 4 or 5 major events that all had to happen in sequence, culminating in McCarthy, to get to where we are today in the American political spectrum. I think that it would be a very different landscape today without that. I think that we would be on par with, the rest of the developed world in the way that we just do everything.
I mean, even with just the Red Scare, because I feel like the Red Scare, while obviously terrible for, civil liberties of United States citizens, was not as and it was like pervasive, but in a propagandist sense, not as a like literal persecution of people, and like that is a different level of fear and a different level of control than I think just like propaganda.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, there's really a couple of things here. Obviously, the Red Scare kind of extended from the early 1920 or like late 1919 or 19 teens.
1916, 1917
Right.
is really when it started. The Russian Revolution and the Bolsheviks kind of coming to power was when that really started taking off, especially with all of the European unrest leading into the First World War.
Right.
Yeah, that was the major first stepping stone. Obviously,
Right.
there was other things that led to it before that, but
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, communism as a theory had existed for many decades before. The Russian Revolution. I think Karl Marx was around like in the 1850s. So
1848 is when Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto.
Right.
So yeah, it had been around for,
but it hadn't reached obviously the biggest point of actual popularity and political power was the revolution in Russia.
Well, and that a lot of that really centered around communist ideas,
True,
and that's
yes.
kind of where people started latching on to, the people have the power, and labor organization and that sort of thing is kind of the underpinning of the revolutions in Russia.
And I mean, obviously, labor had been around before, but it like just like nitrous boosted the amount of like labor movement that we had existing. And you see in the summer of 1919 is like, and we talked about it in the last episode, as all the really great things that people protested and striked for, and eventually achieved, if not in their lifetime sometimes,
Right.
but some of the things that we take for granted today were probably helped along by the rise of communism, at least to some extent.
100%. I mean, not helped along. I mean, facilitated by a lot of these were, the Communist Party, Communist Labor Party, the Socialist Party. Like these were the people who were, helping support the labor unions, organize the labor unions. I mean, without it, it would not have been the coordinated, organized efforts that they were to get to where we got to. Without the Communist Party, you would not have a 8-hour workday or paid holidays or
5-day work week.
Yeah, or unemployment insurance. I mean, anything that we attribute to.
Right. You might have like a shadow of that, or like instead of 5 days, maybe 6 days, you'd be lucky.
Yeah.
I think we'd see a much, you'd be much poorer as a just, average citizen if the Bolsheviks hadn't been successful.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so the Red Scare, obviously, it kind of jump starts in the 1919s, the teens there, and then it really, I guess they kind of say it comes in two waves. It really is pervasive throughout the, basically up until 1960, or even, it kind of does continue until the Cold War ends, I guess. But where it really, the highs are the 1920s, and then it kind of gets to the lows, and then high again in the 40s and 50s is kind of where it comes back with a vengeance.
It was because during the Roaring '20s, obviously the economy was doing better, and so there was less push of a labor movement. There was a big push of the labor movement in the early 1900s, late 1800s, when the robber barons were just completely decimating. There was no middle class. You were dirt poor or you were wealthy. And people were getting fed up with that. Communism started attracting, it was a magnet for labor movements, and that was kind of the first wave into the 1920s. And the Roaring '20s came around. Some of the fruits of their labor had paid off momentarily before it was then undid by,
Great Depression, really.
Well, I mean, it was the presidents leading up to the Great Depression. It was Hoover and Coolidge and
Taft.
Yeah, Taft. They were like, yeah, okay, we can go back and cut some more taxes and get rid of some of these, labor. Like everything that's old is new again. And none of the shit that's going on. And this is not the first time around. We've tried it. We failed at it. We've tried it again. Failed at it again. Rinse and repeat dozens of times, and we're just back at it.
Yeah, it's almost, you can't even blame capitalism for a cyclical economy because, like, it's just been so poorly managed by us. You kind of find it hard to blame, just purely just like the highs and lows on capitalism as a whole, because we truly do shoot ourselves in the foot so
every fucking time, because it gets just slightly better. And we're like, oh yeah, cool. Maybe the rich people do need some more money now again. Because like I'm not hurting.
They
super
learned their
bad.
lesson. Like they would never do something that would cause a depression again. Never.
So yeah, it kind of lulled the movement lulled through the mid-20s, and then obviously the depression hit and it started picking up steam again.
It started picking up steam, but there doesn't seem to be a ton of, as far as I can see, nothing as prominent as like the summer of 1919 type stuff. It doesn't seem like there's quite as much hubbub around the 30s leading up to World War II, even though that should have been more ripe for discontent than ever.
I think there's some reasons for that, and we'll get into that as we go along here. But yeah, you can kind of continue with your outline here.
Yeah, so then obviously kind of post World War II or middle of World War II, you start to see the Red Scare really coming back as World War II in Europe at least is kind of wrapping up, and we start to sort of look at the Soviet Union. Not that we've ever been super favorable towards them, but we really were like, we don't think we're going to be friends with these guys at all, even though we just fought a war with them to, take.
I mean, we fought a war alongside of them,
right towards a similar goal. I don't know how you describe that.
Enemy of my enemy. Because like I said, they allied with the Germans, or at least had a non-aggression pact with the Germans, and had a similar interest of wanting pieces of Poland and Eastern Europe.
True.
And then Hitler was like, yeah, I need your oil now, and I'm going to take it. And then they're like, fuck, America. And so that's when we stepped in. But they would have been much happier at the time to see Hitler succeed than the Allies until they got invaded.
And this is where I think we should have an episode about this, because I think we will disagree where we don't usually disagree very often.
I'm all for it. I love this topic.
I know we talked about it before, but
we have, and I'm happy to talk about it again. But yeah, no, we had never been a big fan of the Soviets at any point. And then after World War II, it was a question. We let Russia take Berlin. We stood down, let them take Berlin, and some people, Patton especially, wanted us to roll into Berlin and keep rolling right on through Russia. At that point, that's kind of the level of tension we were at, even at the end of the Cold War,
Sure.
or
Or
at the end of World War II.
Right.
And so, like the Cold War is just it was part of World War II that never ended, and honestly extends before World War II.
Right.
It extends before World War I, honestly, if we're being honest. And um, then the Russians had a pretty effective espionage program that allowed them to steal quite a few nuclear secrets. So it wasn't long after that suddenly they had we were the kids with the big stick, and then suddenly they had a big stick too.
Yeah, I think it was 1949 when Russia had their first nuclear test that was successful. So 5 years after the war had ended.
4 years, yeah.
Or, less than 5 years. So obviously a lot of that was due to some espionage and some you might call humanitarian efforts by some of the scientists on the Manhattan Project, which we're going to talk about a little bit. And fuck it, why not just talk about it now? So, because it kind of leads into like why the Red Scare, there is actually why the government was really involved with it to the extent that they were. Was to guard state secrets like the atomic bomb. And there were a couple scientists, mainly Theodore Hall, and I forgot the other guy's name, but they basically, of their own volition, without talking to any Soviet people, they seeked out people from that had ties to the Soviet Union and were like, you need to get this information because we don't believe that the United States will be able to be responsible with the nuclear bomb. And so we want you guys to have it too, so that they don't just,
blowing things up willy-nilly.
blowing shit up as they do, which I don't necessarily disagree with.
I think it was a bad move in hindsight, but
I don't know. The Russians haven't used nuclear missiles at any point against any civilian population, so I can't say that I think that it's a terrible decision.
No, but every war since the Second World War
has the threat of thermonuclear war.
It does, but like all of it was proxy wars because of the Cold War, and the Cold War was what it was because we had this nuclear standoff.
I mean, from what I saw, is the Russians were only like, if they hadn't gotten in 49, they probably would have gotten in the early 50s.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't done enough research on the Russians' nuclear program.
And I'm only super interested in that aspect of it because I just watched Oppenheimer for the first time like 2 months ago. And then seeing this stuff, I'm like, wow. Like they talked about like Russians like getting information in the movie. And then I like do this research not knowing that it's going to intersect at all. And then all of a sudden it does. I'm like, wow, this is super cool to get like some, bigger picture stuff. So the government does actually find some communication, and they are able to decrypt I think they were able to decrypt like 7 out of like thousands of communications. And out of those 7, they were able to find a couple people who were involved and what they were doing. So the government kind of did have, in to your point, an actual reason to be cautious of anybody who called themselves communist, but they definitely took it to levels that didn't need to be.
Well, and it was a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way because so going back to kind of the origins of the Red Scare and just being so vehemently anti-communist and making communism a dirty word and everything, you really got to give Woodrow Wilson does not get enough hate in history. Like the man was vile. And
he just kind of sucked.
Oh, he sucked. Yeah, he absolutely
as a president.
He absolutely sucked as a president. He sucked at just being a human being in general. The man had literally no redeeming qualities, and if we really went back and said, worst presidents ever, there's a good chance he could unseat, like, who do you think's the worst president ever?
I mean, for sure, Reagan. Then you got, not Eisenhower, but
Truman.
Truman. You know, Nixon wasn't the greatest for sure either. I mean, not including Trump in that list.
Yeah,
You know,
Trump,
historically presidents.
I mean,
You know, throw
Trump
Bill
just
Clinton in there. You know, just for fun.
well, I mean, by the numbers, you know, you could easily make an argument for Baby Bush being up there.
Right.
And definitely by the numbers, you can make an argument for Trump being up there. You could put Woodrow Wilson against any of them on almost any category of just like what did they suck at, and Woodrow Wilson would be a contender.
Right. And I guess I'm listening to presidents who, like, if I imagine a president, like, their first thing should be to always do good for their people, like, do no harm, essentially.
Yeah.
There are a lot of presidents who just absolutely did nothing. And it's like they sucked at doing nothing,
Right.
but they didn't, like, hurt anybody.
Right.
You know, nothing good happened, but they didn't hurt anybody. These are people who did things, and those things were just bad for humanity.
Yeah, 1,000%. And you know, like I'm always like, definitely of the past 100 years, I would be Reagan, Bush, Trump in that order. Although as time goes on, the social damage that Trump has done is maybe eking him closer to Baby Bush for me.
Yeah.
And that would be a different category. If you start going back further, I would be looking at, you know, like Andrew Johnson, and you know, you start getting around the Civil War time period. You just gotta consider a whole different area of metrics. You know, Zachary Taylor was fucking horrible. Like
pre-industrial revolution, I don't know. Like, you can definitely define presidents in those eras at least.
But Woodrow, you could put him against literally any of them. You can go back to the pre-industrial. He was one of the most racist motherfuckers on the entire planet.
Yeah.
Like, he went back to segregating. Like, a lot of the federal jobs were being desegregated at the time. He literally made black people work in cages in federal jobs. Like, their office had to be like in a barred cage. The man was just horrible on every aspect, including foreign policy. Big surprise.
Yeah.
And he had this. Have you heard of the New World Order? You know, the thing that's gonna change, and usually
is that the part of the cabal of people?
Yeah, definitely the cabal of people.
Okay.
You know, like the Rothschilds are definitely in on it, and all that kind of stuff. He actually wanted a New World Order. Was not quiet about it. Not quite that kind of New World Order.
Yeah, not as diabolic.
Right. But that's what he called it, was the New World Order. He wanted, you know, a league of Western societies, a league of nations, if you will.
Yeah. Only 11 Western and somewhat highly developed nations. I can appreciate, like, the want for collectivist, like, just bringing up humanity, at least, even if it's only the humanity in those imperialist countries. I can appreciate that sentiment, but when it's just so flawed, it's like you don't get a pat on the back for that.
No. And so he wanted that, and it wasn't a bad idea.
Right. The premise of collectivization for humanity is like, that's what we want.
And his League of Nations was the precursor to the UN. I mean, and we can talk about good and bad aspects of the UN any day of the week, but the reality is that the UN has prevented a major world war up to this point, you know.
Sure. Right. Yeah, we haven't had any since its inception.
But he wanted to be. He was very egotistical. He's a megalomaniac, and he
wanted something to cement his legacy.
Yeah, and he was like, "This thing is going to be my way or the highway. Like, this League of Nations is going to be my way or the highway." And it was his sale. So he's getting in there, and he really hated the fucking Russians and the communists at this point. Do you know we put troops in Russia? Woodrow Wilson put troops in Russia?
Yeah, we fought against Russia during the Russian Civil War, I believe. In order to overthrow the Communist Party.
Which we failed at.
Right, which we failed at. But, like, I didn't know that growing up at all, that we had, like, literally fought in Russia.
In Siberia,
Russia.
We sent 13,000 American soldiers to Siberia.
And the British, too, and the French. So, like, the Western parties right away were like, yep, we are against you. We do not care if you're not, like, actively, like, being like totalitarian against like
You
the
know?
rest of the world. We cannot put up with
No.
anybody who's not fully in our capitalist like idea system.
I mean, he literally said it. I had the quote here. God, I should have separated this out better.
Sort those tabs out.
Yeah, I know. He said, he openly wished to overthrow the Bolsheviks to make the world safe for capitalism. That was. He wasn't, like I said, this wasn't like a quiet. He was saying the quiet parts out loud
Yeah.
the whole time. And so he did that. He also said, hyphenated Americans. So African Americans,
Right.
Spanish Americans, Irish Americans,
Asian
Americans were disloyal anarchists who needed to be crushed out. That is a quote that he said in a speech. Like I said, he said the quiet parts out loud.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And he saw in the Russian Revolution that immigrants were part of these labor movements.
Yeah.
Or well, the people who were immigrating to our countries had been part of these labor movements.
A lot of immigrants were from Russia or
Uh-huh.
from
the Eastern Bloc countries, and
Definitely.
and so he's like these obviously these labor movements were very often associated with socialism or communism or the socialist communist parties, and he's like, well, we can't have that shit going on here.
That's
obviously
un-American.
Obviously, he's sending troops to a different country to be like, you can't run your government that way. That's a no.
Right.
So, like, in our country, he's like, well, fuck no. And he's like, we're just gonna start jailing everybody who says that they're a communist, or I feel like they might be a communist, or even if they just say mean things about me, I'm gonna put them in jail. And they're like,
Yeah, I cannot believe that Congress. I mean, I guess I can, but like, it is baffling to me that the Sedition Acts could ever have been passed.
it's fucking insane.
It's literally like the most blatant violation of the Bill of Rights that I've ever seen written out in a law.
Yeah.
And obviously it was cut down in just like 2 years, but it took 2 years.
2 years, and people sat in jail for those 2 years.
Yeah.
No trial, no representation,
Just straight to jail.
Just like, yep, do not pass go, do not collect your $200.
Right.
Like that.
And there's so many things that the United States did that Hitler copied and praised the United States for doing before he did it in Nazi Germany.
Oh my, Hitler loved America. He named his fucking train, his personal train that he rode on was called America. He was obsessed with America. He thought Coca-Cola was the greatest thing. He's
Right.
best friends with Henry Ford. He's like, these people got this shit figured out.
He's like, eugenics, I need that shit up in here. Like, anything that the United States did that was like, we would consider it to be like the bad guy thing that we do, he's like, yes, love it, do it. Like, he got all that shit from America. Like,
Yeah.
he copied us.
Hey, we were hating the Jews like already too. Like
right.
we forget that. We were damn near as anti-Semitic as Germany was before the whole Auschwitz part of it. You know,
they were just in a more politically disruptive time with obviously it being a huge depression post World War One, where they were ripe for somebody who was a demagogue to come up and just take over public sentiment.
So no, it's insane to think, how we were the blueprints for all of that. And like, again, how it's like, you see that First Amendment, can we just white that one out here? Because
Right.
And so that's what he did. I mean, you've probably heard of, Eugene Debs, who is the
On here you certainly heard of Eugene Debs, but
the most successful Communist Party member to ever run for president.
was he part of the Communist Party, or did he just run as I know he ran under the Socialist Party
Socialist,
banner.
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm getting a little interchangeable on
No,
that
they're
one.
depending on who you ask, interchangeable.
I do. He was socialist candidate, though. That is correct. Most successessful socialist candidate to ever run.
Right.
And just to be clear, it was interchangeable for Woodrow Wilson and the United States.
Just like it kind of is now when you
Mhm.
like ask a conservative what does it mean to be communist or socialist.
And they're like
They're the same
the
thing.
same word, yeah.
And-
And that's exactly what it was. So in this particular situation, it's irrelevant. But yeah, he was the most successful socialist candidate. He ran that that
Presidential bid from jail.
and he was arrested for saying words at a speech.
Yeah, just the things that he said during the speech got him arrested under the Sedition Act.
But you say, okay, well, that's one big person who was riling people up, and you just couldn't have that because the world was about to go to war that we weren't going to go to war with. That's another thing that Woodrow Wilson was like, we will not go to war. And then he's like, we really need to get in this war, man. Cause
and that's how you get America walking in within the last year of the 4 or 5 year old war, saying we turned the tide. It was like, yeah, you were just kind of there when there wasn't anybody there. And so
I feel like we laid out that we came in and decided how it was going to end because they had all been ground down to a pulp on every single side.
They were like, we just need somebody to end our misery. And we're like, we're here for you.
So that's what was going on there. And Woodrow Wilson was like obviously saying that he can't have any of these communists or socialists or hyphenated Americans getting too uppity and big for their britches. So he organized what was called the Palmer Raids. And the Palmer Raids were a series of raids. I think they happened in 35 cities around the country.
Yeah, so a couple of them happened in 1919, and then they got even bigger in 1920. Somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000, depending on who you ask. People who are just regular worker, people who are part of unions mostly. Some of them part of the name of the union was Russian Communist Union.
Oh, the Communist Labor Party.
Communist Labor Party. Yeah. So it's if you want to look for people, especially anarchists, which is kind of where the big reason why these happened was because there was some anarchists from Italy, actually, not from Russia, who started sending bombs to U.S. officials, and they didn't like that very much, and so they just
very Patriot Act moment.
Yeah, very Patriot Act moment. Was it? I forget his first name, but he was the Attorney General at the time.
Hoover.
No, Pullman was the Attorney General.
Oh,
and then Hoover was 24 years old, starting at the FBI, and he got involved with this, and this was his big first initiative, was to arrest thousands of Americans in an attempt to deport them because they couldn't convict them of any actual laws. They tried doing that, but the Supreme Court did one good thing actually, and said,
"Nah, dog, you're we'll let you get away with a lot, but maybe going a little too far."
They actually said you cannot arrest somebody for just being a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. And so they're like, "Ah, shit. What else are we going to do?" Well, immigrants are very much less protected in our society, so let's just arrest a fucking bunch of immigrants who may or may not be communists, and let's get them the hell out of here. And so that's what they did. They only actually ended up, I guess, deporting around 500 people. So somewhere between 5 and to 20, up to 20%.
Yeah,
depending on how many people they actually arrested were actually deported. So not really successful by any metric that I would give or consider success, but that's a huge violation of civil liberties that is just completely been glossed over in American history.
Yeah, and this is why I said how does Woodrow Wilson not get more hate? There's
Right.
so much, and he's more or less praised. When I was growing up, I was like, oh, Woodrow Wilson was a good president. He got us through World War II. He came up with the League of Nations. And then, you start looking into Wilson a little bit more, and this is one of the shittiest human beings to have ever lived.
To be fair, a lot of presidents are like that.
Oh, no, I know. but
yeah.
Again.
No, he was portrayed as a good guy, for sure.
And the fact that he's just so blatantly violated the Constitution, so blatant. In a time when it was really hard to violate the Constitution because it still only protected straight white dudes. That was
right.
That was the only thing it
you
protected.
You could still lynch black people in the streets in the South with no repercussions. So
the women still couldn't vote.
Right.
You had carte blanche to just be they freedom and liberty for all white people, and that was white guys. That was
right.
And he still was you know what? This is too permissive. We need to get rid of some of these freedoms we got
here. It's
here.
a supposed threat to their what American ism has always been. It's just capitalism, and it's never been anything else. It's always been for profit. That's the whole point of our country.
Yep.
Freedom is just a byproduct, and it's a right given to us supposedly.
Yeah. Except if you upset you know.
Right, except if you say the wrong thing, apparently.
Mhm. You have the freedom to remain silent.
Yeah, the freedom to say what we want you to say.
So Wilson was doing that, and he's like, he really wanted to get into World War I because he wanted to prevent communism from spreading through Europe. That was a big concern of his. It's part of why he literally sent troops to fight in Russia, which again we leave out of American history classes.
Oh yeah.
And I also like this. It was the White Russians versus the Red Russians during the whole, communist, the Bolshevik Civil War.
The Red Russians being
The Reds, obviously,
yeah.
the Bolsheviks. And so we were on the side of the White Russians because why not?
Well,
even though it wasn't even a racial thing at that
no.
point, it was still. You just gotta go that way.
Is that why there's a drink called the White Russian?
You know
or
what?
is that just because there's a cream element to?
I don't know. This is something.
It's probably just because there's a cream element.
Probably
to
is,
the
but
liquor.
But now I secretly hope that there's like some historical relevance to that.
It's a pretty good drink.
Yeah, I do love a good White Russian. They got Black Russians too, but no Red Russian drink. Maybe that's what we need to make.
Yeah,
we need to make a Red
Sunday
Russian.
Funday Red Russian.
Yes, all right, we're gonna be doing that. But anyway, so he gets us into the war finally, which wasn't super popular by Congress or most of the people.
No.
Because was that remember the Lithuania?
Yeah.
We
started with remember the Maine, and then remember then it was the Lithuania.
Don't touch our boats.
Don't touch our boats.
You do not touch American
we
boats.
Still have a thing about boats.
we really like our boats. You just
That's right.
Don't fuck with our
boats.
boats.
Don't touch them.
So he gets us into the war, and then it's his big moment, right? Like League of Nations and the rest of Europe's on board. They're like, yeah, that's a good idea because we don't want to fucking deal with this shit again, and we want America on our side when this shit happens. Because if nothing else, during a European war, it helps to have an ally that's separated by an ocean that can't be like invaded and shit, And so they're like, yeah, they're all gung ho about the League of Nations, and they all sign on to the League of Nations. And then Congress in America was like, yo, okay, we'll go along with this League of Nations thing, but the president still needs to ask Congress before he declares war, because part of the League of Nations was, you immediately come to the defense of any of the allies in the League of Nations. And the rest of Europe was like, yeah, okay, cool, we're good with that. And Woodrow Wilson was like, no, I get to declare war. Fuck you guys. It's this or nothing. And Congress was like, well, then I guess it's nothing.
Yeah.
We're not signing off on this. So the League of Nations happens because Woodrow Wilson puts it together, and then America doesn't even join the League of Nations.
I love it.
But during all of this, he brings everybody together for the peace conference, and then he's like, no, not you, Russia. Go fuck yourself. You're not going to be a part of this.
Were the Russians not part of the Treaty of Versailles at all?
So,
yeah, okay.
I mean,
they weren't recognized as a country because of the Bolsheviks.
Right. They were recognized as a country and whatnot, but they were not allowed to participate in the peace conference that formed the treaty.
Although I think some of the Bolsheviks did show up, they just weren't able to participate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He specifically excluded them, and then he had a quarantine policy of, we do not do business with the Russians. We do not really acknowledge them diplomatically at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that could definitely have no long-lasting repercussions.
Yeah, certainly not any resentment at all.
Mm-hmm.
Can't imagine why. A newly founded country, like, boy.
So, yeah, that was really, if we're being honest, the beginning of the Cold War.
Yeah, I would say so.
That was the beginning of the Red Scare, and I think back to the
sort of like a queen versus a I don't want to say a pawn necessarily of Russia, but like maybe like a rook or something, not quite all that powerful as a superpower up to that point, and just obviously it grows as a power as time up until World War II and post World War II.
But back to your point about you didn't see kind of the resurgence of that, communist movement through the 1930s and the Depression. I think, and this is just my own musing about it, but the actions of Woodrow Wilson and the Palmer raids and arresting Eugene Debs made people a lot more wary about identifying with parties that could get them targeted by the U.S. government.
Sure. Yeah, and
Um,
that's true. And I could see, especially in the 40s, where that's ramping back up, where like the Red Scare is taking control of just like institutions that are not even related to the government. And it's spreading really wide
mhm.
in ways that just feel weird and wrong. Like, like especially with Hollywood in the 30s
Yeah.
and the 40s. It really like threw away some of the huge stars, or blacklisted some of them, like Charlie Chaplin and Lucille Ball and a ton of other writers and directors.
Mhm.
Um,
I didn't realize Lucille Ball got blacklisted for.
that's what I heard from one of the sources that
Mhm.
I
It
heard.
very well
I
could
heard
be,
Charlie
yeah.
Chaplin a lot, and I
Mhm.
heard Lucille Ball once, so I was like, she's another big name. I just could be wrong, but
Mhm.
people who are suspected of just having communist sympathies,
Yeah.
not even necessarily being a Communist Party member, or certainly not doing anything, espionage
Mhm.
for the Soviet Union, but just, losing their jobs because they were, it for some of the things that we said right at the beginning,
Mhm.
anti-war, pro-labor, just enjoying modern art. It was like
Yeah.
just some of those red flags that people come up with, and like that's all it took sometimes to be removed from your life.
Yeah, and they literally had like the FBI going around to college campuses and gatherings of artists, actors and things like that, and educators, professors, places where communism runs rampant,
Yeah,
and
right.
taking down people's license plates and looking up who was attending these things and then putting them on watch lists and just like illegally surveilling them. Like we had zero, like, you thought the Patriot Act was bad, and it is, and it continues to be,
Right.
but the US has had zero regard for the Constitution. The US government has never given a fuck about our civil liberties. There's never been a
Right.
time where they're like, yeah, no, it says that, but those are more guidelines,
Right.
you
It's more
know.
guideline than a rule book. I just saw what was the something that the U.S. Congress just voted to renew. I think it was something about like giving giving ourselves the permission to spy on like some of our ally citizens in order to prevent terrorist threats.
That was part of the Patriot Act. I don't know.
They like just
Uh,
renewed it or something like
It's
that.
very possible. I guess I hadn't been kept up on that,
But
but
like we did that shit to our own citizens
Mhm.
without any like knowing that they would do anything against the law at all.
Mhm. Yeah, and in a lot of times they tried to entrap them into
Yeah.
doing or saying things just to because
Yeah.
this wasn't super successful because it was a witch hunt, right?
Right.
So then they're like, well, we need to find some witches. So then they would start sending people in to try to like infiltrate and convince them that they needed to say or do something specific that would sell them out as a communist sympathizer or a Russian sympathizer, and it was fucked. Like we've
Classic police force move,
Mhm.
entrapment.
Absolutely.
And one thing that I found very, very interesting
Mhm.
about Reagan,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't know up to this
He's
point,
a fucking snitch.
he was a snitch. He was a confidential informant for the
Mhm.
FBI. He had a code name, T10.
Like the Russian tank.
Yeah.
Fucking A. I didn't know his code name.
I just thought like Terminator version 10 or something like that, something weird. But T10, I know that we labeled the Russian tanks with like T models.
That's what they call them. I'm pretty
Do
sure.
they call
I don't know.
T48s or T64s or whatever?
Yeah. The T10
Oh.
was um one of the earlier Russian tanks. Not it was post World War II, but I guess so was Reagan.
Yeah.
That was in the 50s and 60s, right? That he was doing that shit.
No, he was in the 40s
Was it?
before he was the president of the SAG or whatever.
Yeah, because we've talked about this before, but Reagan was a big union man and
Right.
got where he was because of the unions before he completely fucked over union. Reagan,
Yeah.
again, like I just want to see a cage match between Woodrow Wilson and Ronald Reagan. Like I want
With Nixon as the speaker.
yeah.
On the one side, we have Reagan versus Wilson.
I need this in my life. If you are an animator,
Let's get some AI like
yeah,
Reagan and AI.
yeah, can we please have this? I need Reagan and like remember Celebrity Deathmatch, the claymation like thing on Cartoon Network?
I remember like rap battles where they had like Darth Vader versus like. just, like, a
Oh
bunch of
no,
people
this
or, like,
is
stuff
this
like
was
that.
much more fucked up. Uh, so it was like the Adult Swim type thing. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it was Cartoon Network. It was like late at night.
Right.
It was all claymation shit, and it was just Celebrity Deathmatch, and they just took two random claymation celebrities that were popular at the time, and they like put them in a cage together and like simulate like ripping out each other's spines. I mean, it was very graphic. But I need that with Reagan and Wilson, and I need them both to lose.
Yeah. No. Teddy Roosevelt jumps in and just like
Yes.
slices up both their heads in one hit right at the end or something like that.
That would be amazing.
I am the Master Commander.
They're both the Roosevelts, just like. I mean, FDR would have a big problem with the jumping.
But he's got a jetpack. He's like R2D2 with the,
There we
like
go.
just jetpacks in.
Future Roosevelt. I like that. We need this.
I feel like it could be a Futurama episode, you know?
That would be a great Futurama episode. Oh, that would bring everything that I love in this world together
Right,
in
get the
one.
Nixon head going.
Oh, yeah. Nixon, the head of Richard Nixon would be narrating. It would be, I need this. I need this in my life. Somebody needs to make this happen.
Shit. That's awesome. All right. Well, obviously Ronald Reagan, piece of shit.
And a snitch.
And a snitch.
Fucking rat.
to his fellow actors.
Yeah, he was just giving people. In fact, that's how he met his wife, is because he got her blacklisted.
Oh, perfect.
For being a communist sympathizer, and she was wondering why she couldn't get any jobs, and he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah.
And so she goes up and she's like, "Hey, I give really good blowjobs if you can get me off the blacklist." I mean, I'm paraphrasing and like filling in.
I'm sure that's exactly how it went down.
I mean, she is known as the throat goat. So I'm assuming that's how it went down. Anyway, she went and she spoke with Reagan. I'm sure it was a completely platonic conversation. Who was a married man, I'm pretty sure, at that particular time.
I think you're right.
And yeah. Oh, that's another thing. Yeah, the man of family values. Who
Right. Didn't he get her pregnant, and that's why he like left his first wife? Or was it just?
Don't think so. Yeah, I think it was.
Did he have any kids? I don't
Oh yeah,
know.
he's got kids. His kids fucking hate him.
Oh,
It's great. His kids like living Reagans hate Ronald Reagan. It's
that's funny.
amazing. But anyway, so yeah, Reagan was a piece of shit all the way around and a complete hypocrite on literally everything he stood for as governor and president. He was also a Democrat.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, I can go on a tangent about Ronald slander.
And the reason why I like Ronald Reagan, not only because of this, but
Mm-hmm.
linked to McCarthyism because of Roy Cohn. Because Roy Cohn was integral in helping Joe McCarthy do Joe McCarthy stuff.
Yeah.
And he was integral in making Ronald Reagan, who he became, integral in helping Donald Trump become who Donald Trump was. Like,
Roy Cohn is one of the, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, people that there's ever been in American history.
oh my God, I cannot believe that I had never heard of him before, like doing a lot of research.
He's the thread that connects everything. Like, if you could go back in time and just assassinate anybody from history that would make like the biggest difference,
right?
It'd probably be him.
He's definitely on the list. I mean, it's hard to knock Hitler down from that list, but like Roy Cohn is definitely on the short list.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. There's some other people on there too.
There's a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people, but if we're just talking American history,
right? Yeah, true. It's purely American,
especially like 20th century American history. If you narrow it down, he's There's not. He's Olympic medalist.
Yeah, he's definitely multiple gold medal winner of piece of shitbag guy.
Sorry, this isn't a Roy Cohn episode, and maybe we should do one of those at some point.
I felt like it would be a disservice not to mention Roy Cohn.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm glad you brought him up
relation to McCarthyism.
I still always shelve him in the back of my mind,
right? And that's because just who he is. He's like a shelfable guy,
and that's what he's.
Right, that's his whole. That's how he's remained in power for, or just had remained relevant for just decades. Like from the 50s, the 40s and 50s into the early 2000s. Like, dude was like freaking Terminator until he got AIDS for being gay while hating gay people. I don't know how you live that life, but he managed to do it.
I mean, when he's done all the fucked up shit he's done in his life, that seems like that's kiddie pool stuff right there.
Maybe not 2000s, but I just think of Donald Trump not existing before the 2000s. So
right,
he definitely was a thing in the 70s and 80s. But anyway, so there's the link there. If you ever wanted to find out how Donald Trump got elected, just look up Roy Cohn. There's actually a documentary about him. I think it is Who is Roy Cohn or Where is Roy Cohn? I haven't watched it, but I think it's really good. Probably I plan on watching it. If you're interested, which I think you should be.
Absolutely should be interested in
It
Roy
makes
Cohn.
me, I just want more shit like Vice.
86 is when he died.
86 from AIDS. I want more movies out there like Vice. Like if they made like this Roy Cohn documentary, I'm sure it's not quite as like dramatized.
You could make it pretty dramatized.
I'm sure you could.
You really could. Like without even going off script,
Right.
without the Hollywood liberties, you could make it very, very dramatic.
Like W, the movie was pretty good, not like as good as Vice, but like still like kind of showed like who the fuck is the Bush family, and you find out pretty quick. I feel like there should be a Roy Cohn movie.
There absolutely needs to be a Roy Cohn movie. Man, we should have talked to Brandon Phibbs. Be like, get on finding somebody to pitch a Roy Cohn movie too.
Right, one that connects like
even
Joe
a
McCarthy
docu-series would
right,
be good.
Joe McCarthy, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump. Like that's a compelling like timeline.
Not to mention he was involved with a bunch of mafia bosses and shit.
Right,
like,
you got Trump involved with all the mafia construction in New York. Like, there's a lot to it. He just pervaded through United States history in a way that is
insane. Anyway, back to McCarthyism. I mean, not that this was a huge detour, but we could do a whole episode on Roy Cohn himself. So
right.
Yeah, so obviously there was a bunch of really unconstitutional, really shady stuff going on towards people who were even suspected as communist, and then there was a ton of propaganda to just demonize the idea of being communist.
Sure.
Like it was there's a reason why it has become the catch-all term for everything.
Yeah, everything that's perceived as un-American.
Yeah. It's communist or socialist. That's McCarthy.
Right.
And that is all of this propaganda. I mean, and it went beyond propaganda because people literally had to fear for their lives. People had to worry about who they associated with and what ideals they talked about. And it's one thing as much of a shitstorm of a world we live in today is
right.
Like I would be arrested. All the shit that I've said very publicly.
Yeah. No,
like,
I was thinking about the same thing doing the research. I was like, we would be thrown in jail.
Oh my God.
For doing this episode.
Yeah.
For any of the episodes we put out.
Yeah. For anything. For a 2-minute video I've done on TikTok, I would be in
right.
in prison for the remainder of this era back then. And so you gotta put some things in perspective. We do live in a really shitty timeline and a really shitty time in American history and human history, but also like it was bad out there before for certain people, and it's not like the people who are all worried about free speech and they're being censored today because my Twitter post got deleted. Like,
right.
Shut the fuck up, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like, you do not know what censorship is
right.
until you've been thrown in prison because you're like, communism isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, we could learn something from it.
And
maybe.
they're like, you know what? straight to Guantanamo. Like,
You're going to jail.
yeah, there was a time of government censorship that was even worse than it is today, which is hard to imagine, but
Well, and that's why like there's like a distrust of like government from
Mhm.
citizens, obviously, and I think it's just ironic that Ronald Reagan is the guy that says the 9 scariest words in the English language are "I'm with the government and I'm here to help," because he was with the government when they were doing the
entire
fucking
time.
anti, Bill of Rights shit.
Mhm.
Like,
Well, that's why he knew that those were the scariest words.
well, that's right, and that's why you can always go back to it's always projection from the conservatives because it
Yep.
literally always is.
Mhm.
Going back to like the beginning of fucking time, it is
Mhm.
always projection, and we had the proof. Like,
Yeah. It's absolutely. So then obviously communism is just welfare, right?
right.
So then that was their big excuse to start cutting
Yeah.
all of these programs. Obviously they railed against them as communism when they were getting passed during the New Deal thing.
Mhm.
And I love FDR. And I love all of the New Deal policies because it's the most progressive policies we've ever gotten passed in this country,
Yeah,
bar none. But that was the compromise. That was the capitalism compromise. The
Right.
FDR policies was like, look, guys, we need to do something or we're getting nothing. And they're like, so here's kind of the middle ground.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if FDR hadn't done the New Deal, there could have been I don't know about communist revolution, but there could have been some
There
sort
would
of
have been
workers'
a revolution,
Right.
yeah.
There would have been something because
Mhm.
without it, there was.
Yeah, it would have been looking real French up in here.
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. Been some guillotine sandwiches up in here,
Mhm.
like.
So that's where they right there started trying to associate communism with social programs.
Yeah, right.
And that's why every time you hear that, any social program, you give kids free school lunch, that's communism, and you make sure that, poor people aren't living on the street, that's communism. This is
Right.
where it all started, is they
Yeah.
associated that with the bad word of communism that they'd been building all this negative propaganda around, and that still affects us so much to this day.
Right. I mean, it's a huge reason why we don't have broader social welfare
Mhm.
programs, and we have like pretty strict requirements on like you have to make under this amount of money, even
Mhm.
though this still isn't enough to like be
Live,
above
yeah.
poverty.
Mhm.
Like it's I don't know if it's the reason why we don't have broader social safety nets, but like certainly it's gotta be one of the biggest.
It is a foundational reason. I mean, obviously the reason is rich people do not want to give.
Yeah, capitalism is antithetical to that.
But the
as the way
reason that they've gotten the American people to go along with getting shit on by the billionaire class is this specific propaganda. McCarthy and everything that McCarthy built,
Right.
Making communism a bad word and then tying anything that helps people at all to communism
Yeah.
is exactly why we as a society have put up with it for so long.
Yeah, because I feel like the Red Scare was mainly just like this. It was more, I don't want to say existential, but it was like very kind of just theoretical, like
Mhm.
threat to the United States. It wasn't like, I don't think, as targeted to some of this like actual programs that the government was
Mhm.
trying to do until after World War II and McCarthy.
Yeah. No, 1,000% it wasn't. McCarthy really just started labeling everything that he didn't like or that he was against as communist.
Boy,
And
I can't recall anybody else has ever done that.
right? Nothing's new, man. So yeah, and that had really devastating effects. And obviously the Cold War lingered on. Then it went from arguably pre World War I to 1990 2
Yeah, something like
or
that.
89 or whatever.
Yeah, right around the end of the 80s, yeah.
And and even into the Reagan presidency, the Cold War was very much alive, and we were building fucking space lasers. We were spending
Right.
in modern dollars, trillions of dollars to build space lasers that were never going to work
No.
to shoot down Soviet missiles. Like that was.
I don't even know if they'd work right today.
No, they fucking wouldn't. Like, there's a reason we haven't ever finished that program. It was a stupid program to begin with. But like, that's what we were. Everything, even into the 80s, was. I mean, you think about 80s movies. A lot of them are just Russian propaganda. Oh God, why am I drawing a blank? They just
anti-Russian propaganda.
Well, yeah, anti-Russian propaganda. Why they just fucking made the movie, but tried to make it about Koreans instead of Russians.
Red Dawn.
Red Dawn, that one.
Yeah.
You know, like that was literally just that was a propaganda movie, 100% a propaganda movie in the 80s. You know, and
I mean, the best propaganda movie I've ever seen.
Oh, it's a great propaganda movie, but that's
But yeah, you can see it if you take a second to think about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why the remake wasn't successful too, because it didn't have the same existential
Nobody
crisis.
was that scared of North Korea.
Right, exactly.
And even China, I think they were involved, but they were just like,
right.
It's a theoretical threat. We don't,
but we
fight the Chinese.
Right. We'd been built up so much to be like, Russia's this real threat, even though Russia was never going to invade the American mainland. Like that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But that we had decades of that.
Yeah.
And it's not that long ago, it's basically within our lifetime that the Cold War itself ended.
Right. And certainly within like our grandparents' lifetime,
Well, and our parent, I mean, like I said, 89 or
yeah,
91,
I just mean
whatever.
like being an adult, I guess.
Well, yeah, but I mean, our parents were adults having us at that time. I was born in 90.
It's true.
Don't
think of my parents that way. They were never
1991. So yeah, I was alive when the Soviet Union dissolved. That's when the Cold War ended, and the Iron Curtain was lifted.
Right.
And but at that point, then we'd built an entire industrial complex, a military industrial complex about the Cold War existing, and so even everything since then that we can't consider, because Vietnam was a Cold War proxy war.
Yeah.
Korea was a Cold War proxy war. Every single war we'd been in between 1945 and 1991 was a Cold War. Desert Storm, Cold War proxy war. Every single one was just, we can't fight Russia directly because we both have nukes, so we're fighting in places that they want influence and vice versa.
Yeah.
And then that ended, and we're like, hey, well, now we've got this whole military-industrial complex, and we want to keep that going. So let's go back to blowing up the Middle East again, I guess. I don't know. Let's war on terror, some shit. Like, let's and so even since then, you can say that all of this is still affecting. This is the reason that we have the military-industrial complex, the reason that we continue to dump billions and trillions of dollars into weapons programs instead of giving people, health care.
Well, I mean, to be fair, and that's not even the right way to put it. We didn't just spend money on fighting Russia. We also spent all this money on just putting down any sort of government, whether it was related to Russia or not, that had any sort of like socialist tendencies.
It was called the containment policy.
Right.
Yeah, it was if
specifically Latin America, it's really rough what we did.
Oh my God, we just
South
went and pulled
America.
And this is why all the people who are like, why don't people stay and fix their own country instead of coming to America? You want to know why? Because we went down there and fucked everything up, and then we're like deuces, because they're like, hey, we elected this government that we like and is doing stuff for us, and they're like, yeah, but they're looking a little communist down there, and we can't have that. So
they're not pro-American corporations,
Yeah,
so we can't have that.
Nope.
They have to be pro-corporations.
So we're gonna go down there with some Marines or some CIA agents, or and we're gonna kill them. We're gonna kill the people that you elected to run your country, and then we're gonna find a dude that we like who is definitely not about democracy.
No.
And probably a psychopath.
Usually a military dictator, essentially.
And we're gonna be like, we're gonna make them run things, and then and then we're gonna leave. Okay, we're just gonna be gone after that. We're gonna do.
We're gonna knock over your Lincoln log cabin, and then we're gonna walk away.
Yeah.
And I don't know why you can't just build up your own country. I don't get it.
God, I fucking hate those people. Like, if you were one of those people who are like, why don't the immigrants stay and fix their own country? Please do just a modicum of
Just a tiny, teeny
Central and South American history, and even Mexican history, which is
Right.
part of North America, but just do a modicum of history reading on that and how the United States policies have affected that, and then stop being such a horrible fucking human being.
Just look up 9/11 Peru as your first
Mhm.
step. Just the 1st
Mhm.
one right off the bat I can think of.
Yeah, we did it in Chile.
Or Chile.
Yeah, Chile.
Sorry, Chile. I always get Peru and Chile mixed up. I don't know why. I don't know why.
We did it in Nicaragua.
Literally every country.
Yeah,
we've been to and we fucked shit up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anytime that they were anytime they were fixing their country, when the people stayed there and fixed
Right.
their own country, we're
Yeah.
like, no.
Don't fix it that way. Don't fix it that way.
You're
Fix
fixing it
fix it the way we want you to
right.
fix
We're
it.
and then we just fucking leveled it,
Yeah, and continue to
made
terrorize them and fund terrorists
Mhm.
and fund
it.
radicals.
We literally sent money. Reagan was selling cocaine or crack
Right.
to black people to send money to terrorists in Nicaragua. Like
Yeah.
that was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that I know it was the CIA that organized that, but it's
Mhm.
interesting to get it all the way up to the president and have the president basically signing off on it
Mhm.
because that's how high it went. It's
Oh, he fucking loved the Contras. He was like, they're.
yeah. Yeah, no, he praised them all the
Oh
time.
my god! And they were literally fucking fascist terrorists, and he's
Right.
like, they stand for. They're like the found. He literally compared them to our founding fathers.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah, they're
like,
true revolutionaries, I
Yeah.
think he said.
oh no, he made a direct line comparison to our founding fathers and
Yeah.
said we will support them at all costs, and those costs included violating the American Constitution and
right, and importing drugs.
committing literal crimes and circumventing Congress, all impeachable shit. And he's like, no, Ollie North did it. And Ollie North was like, yeah, I did it. And then Reagan's like, you're pardoned.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
They actually maybe GW pardoned him, or HW pardoned him, but
Yeah, as soon as he got elected,
Mhm.
immediately.
but either way, yeah. Anyway, sorry,
Anyway,
got off on another
I mean-
Reagan tangent there.
Yeah, but just showing America's the bad guy.
Yeah,
I'm
we
almost
are
getting
the
tired of
Empire,
saying
guys.
it,
Like,
like-
in if you ever watch Star Wars, and we
Yeah.
always like to pretend that like we're with the rebels and we're Luke's. No, we're Vader. We got the Death Star.
That's right. That's right. Literally, we have the infrastructure. We
Yeah.
have the military industrial complex that is the
Mhm.
Death Star.
We're literally the Empire, no matter how you cut it.
So, yeah, I mean, the Red Scare, I guess the reason why I wanted to do this episode specifically and
Mhm.
talk about the Red Scare, it was obviously because it was a pretty rough time in
Mhm.
American liberties in the history of our country, but because people always ask why didn't we do more things, or why didn't we do more socialism, or why doesn't it work anywhere else?
Mhm.
And it's because the American government actively does things to make
Mhm.
it difficult and or impossible for socialist policies or progressive policies to get any just handhold in doing anything.
You literally couldn't even talk about it. They're like, we
Right.
will put you in jail or put you out of we will blacklist you out of working for anything.
Yes.
We will throw you in jail and just be like, yeah, we don't know why. No, you can't have a lawyer. Yeah, I know what the Constitution says, but no, I can't read. Sorry. That's you know what?
Yeah. So I mean, there's no doubt that the Red Scare actively hurt policies that were progressive and could have made our lives a hell of a lot better than it is
Mhm.
today. So
Yeah.
and it's sort of kind of wrapping up here.
Mhm.
I have us kind of getting over the Red Scare, in at least from the huge propaganda machine
Right.
that was the 40s
Mhm.
and 50s, moving into the 60s. There really wasn't as much of that. And I think a big reason why is, and the only reason why we have any progressive movement, I think, today is because of the civil rights movement.
Mhm.
And because black people obviously aren't directly related to Russians,
Right.
people don't focus on them being communists. And that's why nobody talks about Martin Luther King today as
Right.
being a socialist, because he's black first and he's a
Right.
socialist 2nd. So, like, hats off to literally anybody who was, working in the civil rights movements and really just black Americans
No.
in general. Hats off to you for making America immensely better today than what it would have been. And I think we would not have basically any progressive policy or any progressive political movement without the civil rights movement.
Absolutely not. I 100% agree. And it's interesting that you bring this up, and I haven't done any research into this, but during the civil rights movement, a lot of the civil rights leaders, a lot of it was based around religion. Obviously, Dr. Martin Luther King was a preacher, pastor, something.
Yeah, preacher,
something, I don't know, whatever. Baptist preacher, right? Yeah, preacher.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of the activists, especially the more militant ones like Malcolm X, started identifying as Muslim. Obviously, you had Muhammad Ali, changing his name from Cassius Clay,
Right.
and then I don't know. It probably wasn't, because we have a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment today, but I think that stemmed more from 9/11.
Yeah, and just like Arabs in general, just us being kind of racist towards them.
Yeah, true.
I see them moving away from Christianity because America has always been pro-Christian above anything else, or I guess, and as far as religions go,
Yeah.
and like the fact that America was so Christian while also being so discriminatory against Black Americans,
Yeah.
it is like, why would I be Christian?
No,
So
that's a fair point. I was just wondering if there was a connection between civil rights activists associating a lot with the Muslim faith and
sure.
the xenophobia we've had towards. But I think it's probably
I think it's probably
more
mostly
9/11,
just-
because I really don't feel like that was a big thing until
No, yeah, I think it was a little bit of a thing. Obviously, we were fighting more in the Middle East in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but yeah, obviously, I think not World War II, 9/11.
Yeah.
But so, and then along with the civil rights movement is still the FBI, still doing FBI things, and the U.S. government doing crazy U.S. government shit and just breaking the Constitution left and right.
Oh my God, yeah, the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover that's another.
J. Edgar Hoover is like another dude. Who's definitely on that short list.
Oh, definitely on the short list for historical assassination for sure. Yeah, because he was doing the same
like
thing.
just a bad guy episode.
Oh, we really should.
Like behind the scenes bad guys.
The puppet master bad guys. I'd
Right.
like that. We definitely should do that
Yeah,
episode.
yeah.
Because J. Edgar Hoover, his FBI was doing, keeping tabs on Martin Luther King and the Black Panthers, and like the same shit they were doing to the communists. They were doing it all over again in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s with the civil rights movement.
Yeah, it's called COINTELPRO. If you haven't heard of it, definitely look it up. There's a ton of information out there, and that's actually going to be our next episode, is really focused on that, because that is like the next big step of the U.S. government taking away civil liberties from Americans, but also B, just like the next. It's kind of, I feel like it is the the stepping stone for modern progressivism, and then the next step from like communist proliferation.
Yeah. Well, I think we did not make our
We're close. We're just over an hour.
closer than normal, I guess. Just over an hour and a quarter.
Hour and a quarter, no big deal.
I honestly went smoother than I thought it was going to do, especially when we got off on some of our tangents here. But as always, guys, we appreciate the hell out of you sticking around and listening to us do this. That's the reason we do it, because, some of you at least put us on play and walk away, and we think you're listening to us, so we appreciate that.
Right.
And you can please, that's a huge support for us. We're finally monetized on YouTube, so we don't get paid a ton for you watching our videos, but we get paid something, so it's awesome when you watch this on YouTube. But wherever you consume it, just you guys listening and tuning in is a huge appreciation. If you want to support us more financially, as always, there's offjawagon.com. You can buy merchandise there. We have a Offjawagon Venmo and PayPal and all of that stuff. But also, we've got something new. We've been telling you it's coming for a while,
That's
and
right.
it's finally come.
Finally pulled our act together.
Taylor got it set up. I'll let him do it.
So what we have is a Patreon site. It's not anything super duper special. We wanted to keep it pretty simple for you guys. We actually do have a member now.
Sweet.
Non-paid member, but which you can be. Just support us.
Well, that's awesome.
We
Hey,
love it.
being a member is a member. Anything helps.
Right. So you can support us through memberships there and a membership through YouTube. They're both the same type of tiers. So we have like $1 a month, just like 25 cents an episode. Like you just think, hey, it's nifty. You guys are doing this. And if you're like, especially if you're on a podcast and you want to just help us support us financially, even that little tiny bit, it would just help a lot. There's hundreds and thousands of listeners out there. If we had a couple of you, half of you, just a little bit of you doing $1 a month, that would really make this possible for us long time into the future. And then we have our kind of highlighted like membership. It's $5 a month, and we're basically going to be putting some exclusive like interview content on Patreon for you to watch. And the other big part of that, obviously, other than just supporting us, further financially, is we are planning on doing at least a monthly Q&A, whether that's on video session or whatever.
Over the phone, yeah.
over the
You guys
phone.
can call in, talk to us personally. I know we've had some requests for that sort of thing. So
Yeah, so
we'll
take any requests. If you're one of those members, we'd love to hear from you and love to engage with you. So
yeah, absolutely. We would appreciate if you guys give that. It's on YouTube and Patreon,
That's
correct?
right. Yep.
And you'll get access to the same exclusive content. And yeah, we hugely appreciate you being here. Whether we understand that everybody's in a different financial situation. We talk about that a lot, so we don't expect a dime from any of you guys. But if you do help us out, it's huge for us. We appreciate the hell out of you for doing it.
That's right.
And if it's successful and you guys seem to be responding to it, we'll be working on more exclusive content and kind of different things. We'll listen to you and see what you want, and we'll try to be creative and come up with some stuff we think you'd want,
Of course.
and keep adding to it and building on it. And we appreciate you sticking with us while we've gotten this all off the ground. So
Absolutely.
we'll stop with our NPR pledge drive now, and
Right.
we will see you guys next week. Love
That's right.
y'all.
Thanks for tuning in.